Over the past couple of weeks, and specifically over the past few days, the United States is now an all-hands-on-deck approach trying to solve, once and for all, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by offering a new solution called the two-state solution, a Palestinian state next to the Israeli state.
There is no way to solve their long-term challenges, to provide lasting security, and there is no way to solve the short-term challenges of rebuilding Gaza and establishing governance in Gaza and providing security for Gaza without the establishment of a Palestinian state.
An idea as ancient as the entire conflict itself, this two-state solution is not new. It's a repackaged, rebranded idea that's being resold to you like Madden 2023, when in fact it's Madden 2009 with just updated rosters, pretty much.
It's more vital than ever that both Israelis and Palestinians find a way to get back to the table and begin negotiating a process whereby they can create two states that are living side by side in peace and security.
This idea is not only ancient, it's actually pretty funny because it failed almost as many times as the Israeli and Palestinians went to war with each other. So what's going on here? Why is the United States trying to promote and rebrand and repackage this old two-state solution idea? And why is it sounding so urgent? What's the urgency? What's going on here? Well, everything has to be understood in the context of politics. It's all a game of interest. You see, the United States just entered an election year. And one thing you never want in an election year is a hot mess overseas. This is something that needs to be mopped up, cleaned up, and wrapped up so that the campaign can focus on economy, on internal issues. And it's not healthy for the Biden administration to have an active conflict in the Middle East ongoing during an election year, especially one that is not as popular as you would think. A lot of people around the world are angry at Israel. A lot of people around the world are angry at Biden. A lot of people in his own party, in his own base, are angry at him for supporting Israel. Now, he has to wrap it up. He has to clean it up because on the surface of it, he has a lot to sell. Now, in his campaign against Trump or whomever, he's going to have a lot to show for. He's going to show that inflation went down from 9% to 3%. Unemployment numbers did not go up. This administration, whether this was a fluke or their actual doing, actually managed to land the economy and lower inflation without causing a recession. And that's a selling ticket they're going to use to try and campaign against Trump or whomever comes out of the Republican primary. Now, I don't know who's going to win the elections in the United States, nor do I think anyone in the United States is going to vote based on foreign affairs, based on what's going on in Israel. But I understand the idea of a hot mess that needs to be mopped away so that we can focus on the things that people actually care about. Now, this is why you see the United States is now harshly pushing this two-state solution. And the idea here is, let's set up a second state. Let's give the power to the current existing Palestinian Authority. Let's import it into Gaza. And then let's just magically hope that the Israelis and the Palestinians will never go to war. And from this point on, because the Palestinians now will have a state, they will sit around the campfire and just sing Kumbaya every night. And of course, as you understand, this is a fantasy and that's never going to happen. So the problem with this idea is that the claim here is that this is going to stop wars between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Once the Palestinians have their own state, have Gaza and have the West Bank, they will no longer be interested in going to war against the Israelis because why would they? It's not rational, right? Well, this is the problem when you try to rationalize with Western logic Middle Eastern conflicts. Now, allow me to explain. The problem with this plan, the problem with this assumption of a peace coming out of the two-state solution is that there's zero chance of this thing would work. Number one, it hasn't worked in the past. They've actually tried this. In 2005, the Israelis cleared all settlements from Gaza. Every single person that was not a Palestinian, soldiers, civilians, buildings, everything was removed, and the Israelis pulled out completely out of Gaza. And the idea was to see, it's kind of a test case, what happens in Gaza before they go for the West Bank, which is a much larger region, much more complicated with settlements, much more complicated militarily. So let's try it on a smaller scale in Gaza. Let's see if this thing becomes Singapore, because they have the beach, they have all these attractions. It's such a beautiful place, right? Let's see if the Palestinians make it into a Singapore or they make it into a Terroristan or Terroristan. I don't know how to say a terror country. Terroristan. Let's go with Terroristan. And immediately what happened is within a year after the Israelis pulled out, hoping to see the formation of a new Singapore on the beaches of Gaza, what happened is that Hamas took over. They kicked out the Palestinian Authority violently, murdering every single one of them, and they haven't had an election since. Not that they need to, because as it stands right now, the support for Hamas, even after what happened October 7th, even after 100 days of war in Gaza, the support for Hamas in Gaza and in the West Bank is about 70%. Now, there's also about 70% of them who hate Iran and Hezbollah right now for basically betraying them and not helping them, but that's a topic for a different video. So this hasn't worked in the past. What the Israelis got when they gave Gaza their own country is, number one, Hamas going to power. Number two, complete militarization of Gaza. Number three, terror attacks coming out of Gaza into Israel, in the beginning in small scale, then in increasing scale, and then October 7th, which was probably the worst terror attack we have ever seen as a humanity. So here's the actual truth about what happened in Gaza. The Israelis pull out, Gaza gets taken over by Hamas, and it becomes a terror country. Now, the Israelis have to blockade it because they have to prevent weapons of getting in there, which of course was not very effective, because what the Palestinians done is digging tunnels all the way into Egypt and importing a whole little army into Gaza under the nose of the Israelis, and with the full cooperation and the bribing of the Egyptian soldiers on the border who played along. Now, obviously, this is not a knock on the Egyptian army in general. I'm just saying, look, the guys who stationed at the border got paid very handsomely by the Hamas people to look the other way. They brought in lots of weapons, lots of cars, lots of equipment, and lots of civilian stuff, actually. If you go to Gaza before October 7th, you would have found a lot of Mercedes AMGs, a lot of electronics, a lot of stuff that came in from Egypt. So the blockade idea is a myth. It's a lie. While the Israelis did actually impose a blockade, the Palestinians literally broke it by digging under and going into Egypt. So the Israelis looked at this and said, well, this was not a good experience for us. Then they tried a different approach. They tried to appease Hamas. They tried to pay them money and try to give them a lot of perks. A lot of Palestinians from Gaza actually went into work in Israel, and the numbers kept going up. In fact, on October 7th, when the terror attacks happened, that number was at an all-time high. So the idea was, okay, we can't fight them, we can't blockade them. Let's just have Hamas become a civilian organization. Let's support them, let's pay them, let's make sure that they become a government, so that they care about their people so much, they're not interested in fighting. Of course, that also blew up in their face on October 7th. So there's literally 0% of this thing working, based on the fact that this was tried and attempted and failed miserably. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and hoping for a different result. Now look, even if this thing works, even if the Palestinian Authority, which will be de facto installed by the Israelis and the US in the eyes of the Palestinian street, even if that government will be accepted by the Palestinian people and not get thrown out by Hamas like they've done last time, here's the other problem. While Hamas is openly saying, look, we do not accept this two-state solution. They can say whatever they want. As long as we're around, we're going to keep fighting until every single square inch of that land that is now called Israel is ours. And we're not going to stop. Two-state solution, three-state solution, we don't care. We're going to take everything. It's a zero-sum game for us. So even if you put that to the side, and you assume that the Palestinian Authority manages to cling on to power in this new government in Gaza, here's the problem. The Palestinian Authority actually does not have a different goal than Hamas, which is the destruction and elimination of the State of Israel. It's not me speculating, it's literally in their charter. It's in the textbooks in their schools. Every single terrorist that has carried out attacks against Israelis and died, that man's family gets paid every single month from the Palestinian Authority to the rest of their natural lives, including the October 7th terrorists. Yes, the October 7th terrorist families are getting paid now by the Palestinian Authority for the heroics they've done. Heroics, right? So the idea here is that the Palestinian Authority is aiming for the same goal as Hamas, which is the destruction of Israel. The only difference is they're smarter about this. They're going to play the long con game. They understand that defeating Israel in a military campaign for the Palestinians is virtually impossible. Their thought process is, let's try and get some achievements politically, by diplomacy. Let's get as much land as we can by pretending to play along with this peace. And that's been long documented. They're not even trying to hide this. There's multiple records of Palestinian Authority senior officials admitting in the open that the whole idea of the peace agreements to reach the 1967 borders is to get Israel to accept a border structure which will not be defendable in the military campaign the day the Palestinian Authority decides to go crazy and attack Israel. And I'm not joking here. This is literally the plan that is being promoted right now by the United States. Gaza will be ruled from now on by the Palestinian Authority. Now, the Palestinian Authority that is not respected, not accepted, and not validated on the Palestinian street, the Palestinian Authority that is paying terrorists that have carried out terror attacks against Israelis, a Palestinian Authority whose stated goal is the destruction of Israel, who admitted that the peace process is just a ruse to get better borders before the actual attack. That Palestinian Authority is now being handed Gaza by the US government as a way to create stability and peace in the region. And the crazy part about it, that in case that Palestinian Authority fails, which is most likely the outcome, it will be replaced by Hamas, which has an outspoken goal of destroying Israel and has shown their full intent and capability to do so. And that is what's now being promoted by the US to push Israel into a suicidal arrangement, which is literally just being put in place to help this administration make it through these elections somehow against Donald Trump. In fact, this plan might be a worse foreign affairs decision than the entire Barack Obama policy in the Middle East. And that's saying a lot. The crazy part about this is that there's an actual plan that might work, that is being completely ignored by the US government because of its complexity and the fact that it is time-consuming, even though it will provide better security for both the Palestinians and the Israelis long-term. That plan is actually described in a whole video that I've done about this. I'm going to put the link right here. Go watch the video. If you haven't yet, consider subscribing to our Patreon. These videos are not fully monetized. This is not the sort of thing that advertisers on YouTube like. I get it. So if you want to support our work here, consider subscribing to our Patreon at patreon.com/TomNashReport. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.